Good evening, everyone. Always, in addition to Payal and me, there's, of course, Nina, Shuli, Ritu, and Anjali, who join me in welcoming all of you here today. There's also a special group of people, new companions on this journey. There's the American Express group and their guests, who we are very glad to welcome into the community of Algebra. So, welcome all of you. You know, this evening is going to be, I'm particularly very interested in it because there's a riveting lineup of speakers and very eclectic lineup of speakers. But first up is perhaps the most complex conversation, the one that really affects us all in very, very deep ways. And to introduce that conversation, I wanted to start with two truisms. One, that India is perhaps the most complex place in the world, you know, beating even the Middle East and Syria and Trump's America. And the second truism is that even the worst detractors of Mr. Modi would not be able to say anything except that he won the 2014 election on a hope vote. People believed that he was the change agent. He packaged himself as the change agent. And mostly, even if it is 35% of India, bought heartily into that dream. 3 years later, there are more question marks on the landscape. As we know, over the last few months, there have been a lot of doubts about the economy, a growing sense of gloom. Some of the naysayers have been seen merely as political detractors, but I'm going to reel off a few figures which are mostly uncontested. The first is that the GDP growth seems to have come down to 5.7%. Many people argue that if you take away all the new indices of the GDP, then we're really down to 3.5%. Credit Suisse now looks at India as going through a period of a dark cloud. Actually, they call it a dense fog. S&P Global Rating has reduced India to the lowest in terms of investments, and the next would be a junk status. There's 90% of those who are trained by Skill India have not got jobs. Last year, we made 1.35 lakh jobs in the core sectors, labor-intensive sectors. The World Bank says 69% of Indians are going to be disenfranchised from jobs because of automation. We have $131 billion NPAs, you know, of souring debts. And many more figures can go on. So clearly, and I'm not even talking about agricultural distress, and of course the big question facing all of us, which is where are the jobs? Because every month, 10 lakh Indians join the workforce. Every year, we have 120 lakh young Indians joining the workforce. We had promised jobs, and they're not available. So to really understand that from 2014, and many of these are, of course, structural, and it's not that it's happened in the last 3 years, but some of these are self-wrought. And so the question is that the brand India that was created in 2014, how robust is it now, mid-term through this, through this dispensation? And are there things to be really worried about? What is the hype? What is the reality? Those are the questions that we are going to pose to a man who really sits at the heart of that creation of both hope, of brands, and of an agenda. If there's one man beyond perhaps Mr. Modi, Mr. Jaitley, and Mr. Amit Shah, who is responsible for creating that idea of a brand India, it is this man, Amitabh Kant, who has, of course, been the architect of Make in India, of the Incredible India program, of Skill India, Smart India. I mean, you can name it. Pretty much every hopeful new idea that has been put out in the public domain has in some way his hand in it. He's also the CEO of Niti Aayog, and so is the head of the economic think tank of this government. And yet, a month or so ago, they had to create a new body, the Economic Advisory Council, because even the RSS, which is in many ways the grassroots feedback mechanism for this government, has alerted the government that storm clouds are brewing on the landscape. So is that continuing dream robust? Are there things to worry about? And why are we where we are? To answer all of those questions, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Amitabh Kant. It's very sporting of you to come, Amitabh.
Yeah.
especially in the heat of battle when you know that many questions are going to be thrown at you. But
Especially in the midst of rock stars, cinema stars, and great musicians.
yeah. Well, as I said, you're as significant as them, if not more, you know. But Amitabh, I want to just caveat before I start throwing all questions at you. I wanted to caveat that one wants to acknowledge that even when one is critical or scrutinizes, that underlying that, I think certainly in this community, there is the sense of the complexity of the task of creating a robust and sustainable economy for this country. But as I reeled out, that there are a lot of facts and figures in the public domain now, which makes the prospect of India fairly gloomy in the short term and very alarming in the long term. So before we begin to unravel the details of all of this and the challenges and accomplishments, dispassionately speaking, you know, as somebody who understands brands, how would you rate both Brand India and Brand Modi today, dispassionately?
You know, Shoma, I was wondering as to why you're inviting me because, you know, I've, in the midst of this very eclectic audience, in the midst of a great film star, you know, I've worked both in North and South Block for years together. Between the two blocks, we managed to block just about everything in India. but, you know, irrespective of all this despondency and despite all this gloom that you're talking about, let me tell you that India remains an oasis of growth in the midst of a very barren economic landscape. We are doing extremely well. If you look at the latest September figure, India has bounced back in a very big way. And let me also tell you that it was very necessary to carry out structural reforms in India. It's not possible for India to grow at 10% over a long period of time, 9 to 10%, over a 3-decade period with a $5 trillion formal economy and a $5 trillion black economy. No economy in the world has been able to do this. You know, India's cash to GDP ratio is very, very high. 93% of the transactions are in cash, so you have to smash that. And everyone was asking for GST. I mean, you need a country with one tax regime. You had a very cascading effect of tax, and it impacted manufacturing. It impacted exports. And when you push for structural reforms, the country and its people, and particularly intelligent people like you, should have the courage, should have the determination, and should have broad shoulders to bear it for a couple of quarters. If Indians can't bear it for a couple of quarters, forget structural reforms. Each one of us must have that both the courage and the guts and the determination to say we'll take India to a long-term trajectory growth, and we'll do it. And the September figures show that we have bounced back. Just one quarter. I mean, I personally feel that we'll do extremely well in the long run. India needed a one tax regime, and nowhere in the world has a one tax regime of a goods and services tax not impacted growth for a short while. It's impacted every single country where this was introduced. So be optimistic about it. And I'm absolutely confident that India will bounce back in a very big way, which it has already started doing. I mean, it's very important. It's very important for Indians not to be pessimistic, but to be absolutely optimistic. And let me tell you also this, that it's not possible for government to do everything. I mean, if you expect Mr. Modi to clean every single road or every single street corner, whereas we Indians keep dirtying it, you expect India to be clean? It's not possible. Every Indian must contribute to it.
But
and that's a critical job which Algebra must contribute towards.
Well, I'm certainly up for the critical end of the job. But Amitabh, you know, you made this, there are 2-3 questions I'm going to throw at you at the same time. One, that you said that we should not be pessimistic, but would you at least accept that one should be vigilant and that one should be critical? Does that necessarily equate to pessimism?
No, we've got a long road ahead. I mean, we are 1 billion people. I mean, try and understand this. It's a country which is bigger than 24 countries of Europe, plus another 30,000 kilometers. We are a very large country, huge legacy of issues. We need to do well on education. We need to do well on health. We need to do well on nutrition. All these areas require a lot of hard work, and they need major reforms. Each one of these areas require major reforms which will upset the status quo. And when you upset the status quo, and when you push for change, there will always be people who will say, don't upset the status quo. India can't continue to grow with status quo. You need to be an agent of change. And when you push for change, each and every individual must be vigilant. We must be all vigilant. But we must also contribute to nation building. It's important to do that. And there's plenty happening in this country, nothing to be despondent about. I mean, why are we so being despondent about? I mean, I met the IIT director of Mumbai just a fortnight back, and he told me 40% of the students who passed out this year have either done their own startup or joined a startup. I mean, the energy, the vibrancy, the dynamism which I see in the young Indians is just amazing. I mean, they are the ones who are going to transform India. It's not you or me sitting here. We can talk about it ad nauseum, but the young Indians have a huge energy. There's one girl called Pranshu Bhandari who's taught 9 million Indians how to speak English in 1 year through her app called Hello English. I mean, it's unheard of. No school, no public school, no private school has ever been able to do this. She's been able to do this with her digital technology. I mean, we're the only country in the world with 1 billion biometric. We're the only country in the world with 1 billion mobile. We're the only country in the world with 1 billion bank account. No other country has that. And we'll be the first country in the world, let me tell you, 3 to 4 years down the line, because the cost of transaction through biometric, when you use a credit card, you're paying 3.5%. When you use a debit card, you're paying 1.5%. When you use your biometric and your own mobile phone, you're paying zero cost. We'll be the first country technologically in the world, 4 years down the line, we'll make credit card, debit card, ATMs all technologically irrelevant, totally irrelevant. So we are in the midst of a very major technological leapfrogging. India is in the midst of a huge technological leapfrogging, which commentators like you must recognize.
No, I understand that, Amitabh. So, as I said, in 2014, certainly there was a hope vote, and there is a intention that is apparent. But, there are many interesting gaps in this. One is that, as you yourself said, that 94% of India was part of the informal economy. So even many economists are now acknowledging that even when we speak of the GDP figures, part of why there was so much obfuscation over the numbers and whether we've really bounced back or not is that there is no way of actually assessing the distress in the informal economy in India. Neither does the media go there, nor does government mechanisms, really economic mechanisms or paradigms, assess what pretty much 94% of this country is feeling, and that doesn't reflect. So yes, maybe in some ways we have bounced back, maybe the formal economy has bounced back, but the pain of the informal economy is not being captured. We've seen agricultural distress, farmers on the roads, across states. That is not reflecting in our conversations. And the second question I'd like to put to you is that when we speak of 10% growth, we are concomitantly hearing that the growth in India since 1991 has pretty much been jobless growth. So in this time, the rich in India have gone from 48% ownership of wealth to 58%, over the last 2 years. That's the jump in wealth of the top 1% of this country. Whereas the rest of India, that trickle down is not really happening. So the question I'd like to put to you is that do we need to rethink the way we are approaching the economy? Because in the short term, we can keep playing with numbers, but in the long term, these huge structural issues that face the country, lack of jobs, millions of people joining the workforce, agricultural distress, the fact that manufacturing is not creating new jobs, those things are not being addressed in our economic conversations.
So one is, let me first put things on record. There's no obfuscation of statistics. I mean, we're just following a model which the rest of the world follows. I mean, that's been accepted by IMF. I mean, it may not be accepted by Shoma Chaudhary, but it's been accepted by IMF, it's been accepted by World Bank, it's been accepted by ADB. I mean, that's the statistics which every country of the world follows.
I'm very relieved to have one person in my corner, which is Mr. Subramaniam Swamy.
Okay, fair enough.
He came to Algebra and even he accepted that there seemed to be some, let's put disagreement over the numbers rather than obfuscation.
Okay.
So, it's a good man to have in your corner.
No, so you can, I mean, I'm willing to disagree with you on that, but that's the methodology which has been accepted across the world. So, the second thing is that it's, India has challenges. Let's accept that. We are a big country, there are huge challenges. And the challenge is that we need to radically transform. According to me, we need to radically improve on our nutrition. It's not possible that 33% of the stunted children must come from India. I mean, there's something seriously wrong. It's not possible to have such high levels of infant mortality and maternal mortality. It's not possible that you've been able to provide access of education, and yet about 40% of the children are not able to read in class 5. They're not able to do class 2, read the English of class 2, or not able to do addition, subtraction of class 2. So the quality standards have fallen. And I'm a great believer that it'll be very difficult for India to grow and progress over a long tenure of period, 3 decades or more at high levels without a very strong focus on education, health, and quality, and nutrition. But for India to be able to do that, it's important to understand that India must continue to grow and grow rapidly at high rates and create wealth. If you don't create wealth, you'll never be able to have the investable surplus to be able to put in health, education, and nutrition. So when many of you speak, with a very left-oriented mindset, as if wealth creation is evil or wealth creation is terribly bad, it's not. Allow wealth creation to take place so that India can grow at high rates, so that you can mop up through taxation and put increased resources into health, education, and nutrition. I'm a great believer in health. I'm a great believer in education. My whole focus is right now on nutrition. But I'm a great believer also in wealth creation for India. And if India is not able to grow rapidly, and if we are not able to create the right environment for rapid pace of growth for India, and enable wealth creation by private sector, it's not the government which creates wealth. Government creates the economic policy and the economic environment for private sector to create wealth. We must put the policy framework so that the private sector must create wealth, and that wealth must be then utilized for health, education, and nutrition. So don't damn all wealth creation. That's a very wrong thing.
So, Amitabh,
secondly, on job creation. Let me take you on job creation. The nature of job is changing, and it's important for all of us to accept that. To keep saying that government is going to create clerks and government is going to get you jobs for peons, and that's a wrong philosophy to my mind. I mean, it used to happen when I just joined government, but the mood of the nation has radically transformed. I mean, we must, if you look at the job creation sector, and I've tried to analyze it. Actually, the nature of job, one is that the manufacturing is increasingly getting digitized, whether you call it intelligent manufacturing or smart manufacturing. There's a huge push for that, and India must embrace it. India must embrace it with all its might, and there's huge gains for India. Secondly, the nature of jobs is changing. I mean, many of us are not aware, but actually Ola has created in India close to 650,000 jobs. I mean, you may say they are drivers, but they're all owners of cars, 650,000. And Uber has created about 450,000 jobs. There's a totally new class of jobs which have been created. And I think if we are able to bring out structural reforms in a health and education sector, and to my mind, these are sectors which are going to create big amount of jobs. There's a big push for radical changes in education. We are pushing for huge changes in education, for online education, distance education, huge changes. You wait and see, there'll be massive changes in education and health, and they will be the next big wave of job creation sectors. But the problem in India is not about jobs. Everybody gets a job. The problem is about low-paid jobs. It's about underemployment and low-paid employment, and we need to take them to higher levels, and that can't happen without a lot of us becoming entrepreneurs. And I'm really delighted. One of the main reasons why I wanted to come here was to see how 6 dynamic, energetic, vibrant women have created this great organization called Algebra. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing which many of us, which many more people should do. And I believe India can't grow at high rates for a very long period of time till we don't push for, a great amount of gender equality in India. India loses out.
Amitabh, you, just like me, you've jumped many issues that I want to kind of come back to. And I now understand why you've called the Brahmastra of the government.
It's better to beat you at it because you start grilling me so much.
But, Amitabh, so I have to cycle back now and couple of things. First, this immediate labeling of each other as left of center, right of center. I think the beauty of the 21st century, and certainly this decade and those to come, is that we have all been released from these paradigms.
I wasn't referring to you. I was...
Okay. I can always play the tape back to you. But that apart, the point I was making is that, yes, there's absolutely nobody who's opposed to the creation of wealth, but what we do with that wealth, the deployment of that wealth certainly is an issue. But let's stick first with the creation of wealth. Do you think that all the structural changes that Mr. Modi's government has done has created animal spirits in the market? I'm not even now going down to the grassroots and the 94% of India. Let's stick with the 6% of the formal economy. Is private investment at a high? Is there wealth creation happening at the pace that you want? And would you accept, even if he's seen to be a political adversary, that Mr. Raghuram Rajan has been constantly warning that the growth trajectory of India cannot come out of the China route? That we shouldn't be looking at exports because global markets are saturated. And we should not be looking at manufacturing because, as you said, huge amount of robotics and automation has come in, and that's not going to take us forward. But you specifically, Amitabh, are very gung-ho about these particular routes, So have you been rethinking that? Would you take on Mr. Rajan's criticisms or warnings?
I believe that whatever India does and whatever Indian entrepreneurs do must do to size and scale. We Indians, if your economy is full of 90% micro, small, and medium enterprises who never become large, then there's something seriously wrong. And those who say that you can grow on the back of your domestic market, that you can keep growing year after year for long periods of time on the back of your domestic market, are very seriously mistaken. No country in the world post-World War II, whether it was Japan, whether it was Korea, whether it was China, has ever grown on the back of domestic market. The reason for this is that what you get in the domestic market, 10x of that you get in the export market. 10x of that you will get in the export market. And therefore, every single young person who's here must focus on penetrating global markets. Till you don't capture export markets, India can never become a big manufacturer of goods and services. It's not possible. I'll tell you, theoreticians, academicians, commentators will keep saying this, but India can never grow without penetrating global markets. At the peak of when Japan was growing, the second point I want to make is that it's very important that we improve our productive efficiency. It's important to exports. You will never be able to penetrate markets till you don't become a very productively efficient economy. And therefore, when Japan was growing, actually 31% of its GDP was being contributed by productive efficiency. But when Korea started growing, 36% was being accounted by productive efficiency. But when China started really growing, and for over a decade it grew at 10% plus, almost 68% of that was coming from productive efficiency. So we need to become a far more efficient nation and to penetrate global markets. And anybody who's saying that you can keep growing on domestic strength is talking
Amitabh, isn't there irony here? Because whenever you're projecting India as a destination, it's because we keep saying there's this massive untapped market here. So we are selling India to others, but we don't want to utilize it ourselves. We don't want to go to our domestic market.
No, no. I'm not. See, you must understand that, firstly, India's share, and it's very important to understand this. India's share in the global export market is only 1.4%. 1.4%. Now, if you can't increase 1.4% to 2%, then there's something wrong with us. I mean, every crisis is an opportunity, Shoma. Every crisis is an opportunity for you to enhance your productive efficiency and penetrate markets. It's not possible. And I'm not saying that you don't look at domestic market. You look at domestic market. But use the strength of your domestic market as a springboard for exports. I mean, everybody does that. I mean, you use your domestic market, but don't start thinking that this is the end all. I've achieved everything in life. Indians must have the ambition and the passion to enhance that.
Okay, I'm going to just move away slightly because, I don't want to just get snarled in this one conversation. But again, let's look at the things that...
So are you saying that you're a believer that we can keep growing on the strength of only our domestic market?
No, not necessarily. I was talking about focus.
That's what
I was talking about focus areas. And yes, Amitabh...
All that I'm saying is look at your domestic market, produce to that, but use that as a springboard for exports and penetrate markets.
I think, Amitabh, that there is a sense of being trapped by what's happened in history. Whenever one talks to economists or those who are grappling, and I admit that one has an outsider's and an armchair perspective, but the truth is, and it seems quite apparent, that other societies and markets have got saturated. So when you want to repeat the cycle of history, it's just an inability to really think out of the box, because history is showing you and contemporary economies are showing you that there isn't that space for growth. But as I said, let's move away from that.
Let me put that. Nothing is saturated. Nothing, no market is saturated. You innovate, you disrupt your manufacturing process. This is you are in the midst of the biggest disruption taking place. If you can't disrupt now, you'll never be able to do it again. This is the time to reduce your cost of production and penetrate markets.
Okay.
This is the time to innovate for Indians.
So let me move away then to two factors which you're very optimistic about, which is about digitizing India. You just spoke about how we will obliterate the need for, many of the cards and things even that we use, that we're all going to become digitized. Now, Amitabh, that's where some of the anxiety of Indians on the ground come, because the ground reality is that you basically don't have internet. 1.5 hours out of Delhi, even on the highway, your mobile goes dead. In the villages, there's no access to the internet. There's the cost of the net. So when you're disenfranchising the old cash economy and trying to push India overnight, as you use the word leapfrog, into a digital economy, is there an element of hubris in that? Don't you think part of the problem is of the way we are packaging things? Skill India, Smart India, Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, Stand Up India, It sounds like your pocket is full of Indias, But isn't economy and democracy a dialogic, organic, slow, torturous process?
So, about a month and a half back, I was in Jharkhand, and I went to this tribal colony where, they have the IT Common Service Center. Every tribal woman there had a mobile, and they were all buying their ration. Using that mobile, the ration card dealer was also the bank correspondent doing cash in and cash out for them. They were using this for all the digital payment of their ration items. And I was really amazed. And before that, I had gone to Krishna and Godavari district of Andhra Pradesh, which is again a very backward region where every single person uses the mobile, the digital transaction, to buy his ration, to buy his fertilizer, to do all cash in, cash credit, through this ration card dealer who's also the banking correspondent. This is the model which will spread. My only request is that you must come with me to this Jharkhand village, and you must come with me to Krishna and Godavari district to see how India is changing. It's very important because people in Delhi make all statements without understanding that the poor people of India, that the poor people of India, and exactly the same statement which you made, was made when mobile came into India. Every single person in Delhi, every single commentator said that mobile is for the rich and elite. The poor people of India will not accept it. When the ATM came, every single person sitting in every single five-star hotel said, no, we'll do it. The poor people of India will not be able to do it. Let me assure you, Soma, that every single tribal woman, every single person living below the poverty line, they use the mobile much better than you and I can do, and that is why the spread of mobile telephony in India is so high. They will accept technology much quicker, much faster than you and me.
Sure. I would hate to get caught in this dialectic where one is saying everything is wrong with
No,
India.
there's no
That's not the
dialectic.
case.
There's no dialectic at all. I'm merely saying that we have
You're
today...
saying we are at the early stages.
I'm saying that we have 250,000 common service centers. Every single village has a common service center which is fully connected. People go there. Number of ration card dealers have been provided internet connectivity. This year, we are providing 150,000 panchayats with connectivity. Next year, we are providing another 150,000 panchayats with connectivity. And the number of, and all these areas, there where we are not able to reach, we are able to provide, we are providing Wi-Fi hotspots. So there's a big action plan under implementation to provide connectivity.
Okay, so Amitabh, I just wanted to switch now to an issue which would concern this audience, which is private investments, and as I said, the animal spirits of the market. One big aim of the Modi government was to improve the ease of business in India, but we are at 130 out of 190 countries. Do you feel robust about that?
Yeah, so when this government came, actually India was at 142 or something. What has happened is that a lot of things have been done on ease of doing business. You can register a company in one day. An MSME can register in about almost 1 hour or something. The number of forms for import and exports have been brought down from 12 and 11 to just 3. We've had a one tax regime now. GST has been a move towards ease of doing business. We've pushed for the bankruptcy law so that exits can take place. Many startups will fail, they can exit. Many companies will fail, they can exit. A lot has been done. But more important than that, because India is a very large country, it's not the central government, but also the state government, we started ranking states. First year, Gujarat came number 1. The very second year, Telangana and Andhra knocked out Gujarat. Gujarat came number 3, but the good thing was that states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh came 4th and 5th. They from 30th position, 30th and 31st position, they moved up to 4th and 5th.
I can't resist this joke. So the Gujarat model of growth didn't have very long roots.
No, Gujarat got knocked out. So that's what I'm saying, that the pressure of competition, the pressure of ranking, the pressure of naming and shaming states is very important. And this is the first time it's being done. And you will see a huge improvement in India on ease of doing business as we go along. And I think this year's and it's also important to understand, Shoma, that World Bank ease of doing business actually takes into consideration only your performance for Mumbai and Delhi. Many of you are not aware of that. So Mumbai and Delhi, the municipal laws, construction business, they're very complex. Very, very complex. If you want to get a permission for a building, it's a nightmare. So Mumbai and Delhi are very tough. But the ranking of states is far more important for India than the World Bank. But even on World Bank, I think this year India will see a big improvement.
So just a couple of weeks ago at the World Economic Forum, Mr. Sunil Mittal said that 200 of the top corporates in this country have downsized their workforce. And he said that if this is the trend, then the business community will not be able to take the rest of society along with it, So there seems to be a lot of people who are worried, Amitabh, and you're not seeming to reflect that concern. I appreciate, both the passion and the intention, but should you be reflecting some of the anxiety of people around you?
Yeah, so 2 points on this. One is I'm a great believer in private sector. I believe in the animal spirit of the private sector. I talked about wealth creation. What had happened in 2014 is that India had created excess capacity. A lot of debts had been taken from banks, and we know the impact and the implication of that, non-performing assets, A number of private sectors are in doldrums because they had not done their due diligence, etc. So don't blame the government alone. I mean, this was all done in the previous regime, but a lot of bad debts exist. In the last 3 years, if you look at the trend of investment, the government's investment on infrastructure, road, shipping, ports, etc., highways, has been about 12% more than what the private sector investment would have been. So the government has, through its public sector investment, made up for the lack of private sector investment. But I'm a believer that government may have constructed, but in the long run, the government must start doing reverse BOT by selling off many of these assets which it has created. And that's why the government is now putting a number of, because these are, when you are doing roads, there are a lot of risks involved. Government has completed these projects, tolls have started flowing in. These projects are de-risked. So when the government sells them in the market, which it is now planning to do, it is putting a lot of disinvestment into the market. 10 strategic disinvestment will happen. We've recommended about 40 odd companies for strategic disinvestment. So when you'll have disinvestment, you'll have strategic disinvestment, you'll have closure of sick units, you'll have roads being sold, you'll have civil aviation airports being sold, you'll have a lot of private sector coming in.
So Amitabh, how do you personally respond to both Yashwant Sinha and Arun Shoury's criticism of the condition of Indian economy right now?
See, I'm a great believer in structural reforms, number one. India needed it, and we must back them to the hilt. If you are saying that India should not have gone through GST, it's unfair to say that.
But has the GST been rolled out as it should have been?
No, there will be pains. It's a process of evolution. You will arrive at a better GST. The important thing is that the government has responded to, it has made several corrective measures recently. It's a responsive government. The earlier government was not even responding. None of you was raising your voice. Now the government responds and yet you are critical. So
Amitabh, I beg to disagree. I'll pull out lots of stories and lots of the UPA did not lack for criticism. The UPA did not lack for criticism. Both from the media and the opposition.
So one is the government is at least responding. Now, number two is there are issues. Let me tell you, there will be challenges. There's a challenge of reviving private sector investment. My view is that government needs to put out a law because the government is sitting on a lot of de-risked projects, which they've completed. Government must do strategic disinvestment in a much bigger way. Government must push out a lot of infrastructure that it has created. Government must be able to improve radically the quality of health, education, and nutrition. Government must do many more things. I mean, there are challenges on the job fronts. If you are not able to drive private sector growth, government may be able to push investments for some period of time. But in the long run, you need to revive private sector investment, definitely. What is the doubt in that? But I'm quite sure the government is very, it's been able to create a great energy vibrancy in the startup movement. We are disrupting school education. We've done 10,000 tinkering labs in schools now. We've created incubation centers across India. So what we are looking at is not just 1 year, 2 year, we are looking at a long-term trajectory of growth for India so that India becomes a nation of startups, India becomes a more innovative nation. We are able to change our education system. We are able to improve the quality of our education. I mean, these are long-term issues.
So, okay, we are going to open this up very quickly to the audience. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. One is that this whole thing, as I said, of creating slogans around economic agenda, do you think that that's slightly misplaced? Would you, going forward, tone down the flamboyancy of the economic agenda around India, or do you think it serves a purpose? Just very quickly, Amitabh.
No, whatever has been done, the Prime Minister has gone on record to say that his whole period will, whatever he had to do in terms of, programs and policies he's done, and the focus is entirely on implementation now. So his focus is entirely on implementation now. Implementation.
Okay. Was it your idea to shift the slogan of Achhe Din to a futuristic New India?
I don't, see, I never coin slogans. For me, brand is not about advertising. You know, I mean, when we did Kerala, God's Own Country, it was about creating a destination. It was not about a brand. It was not about just a slogan. A slogan never gives you result. It's entire delivery of the product.
Okay, two more rapid fires. Yeah. One is that you just spoke about how the government should not be telling tourists what to eat and what to drink. Would you also say they should not be telling their citizens what to eat and what to drink?
Absolutely. No, I went on. So I went on record at the Jaipur Literary Festival long time back when a similar question was asked by someone else. And I said, you know, I've lived in Kerala, and my neighbor to the right, who was a Brahmin, used to eat beef, and my neighbor to the left, who was a Nair, used to eat beef. So they were all Hindus. So it's what a citizen wants to eat, what a citizen wants to drink, is entirely his choice. Government has no role in it, and government should not get into individual choices at all.
Well said. And again, as a very astute brand, you know, people who understand brands, do you think that the story on Jay Shah has dented the brand of the Modi-Amit Shah duet? But Amitabh, let me move to the questions. Yeah. I'm sorry, this is from Rajan. Government is increasingly adopting private corporations' way of implementing policy and change. Not sure how this is different than a my way or highway style of business. What is your opinion? That the government is increasingly adopting the work culture of private corporations and of implementing policy and change through that way. And so he's saying that I'm not sure how different this is from the my way or highway style of business. How do you respond to that?
No, in Niti Aayog, I've taken a lot of young people. You know, I've taken people, I've not gone through the normal bureaucracy. I've taken a lot of young people, young professionals. I've got young people who've come in from Harvard, Stanford, Oxford. I think they've brought in a completely different energy and, tremendous vibrancy in Niti Aayog. I mean, they're phenomenal people to work with, and I've greatly benefited from them. And they've really driven Niti Aayog. So that's nothing to do with my way or highway. It's good to get a lot of lateral talent into Niti Aayog.
Someone who hasn't sent their name is saying that what's the percentage of chance that the Modi government will be able to tide over these dark clouds by 2019?
I'm pretty confident it would. I'm pretty optimistic because the growth is bouncing back.
Okay.
And 5.7%, Shoma, is not it's a pretty good growth rate. And it's the latest figures of September show even a much better growth. And if you look at World Bank saying that we'll grow at about 7%, if you look at Christian Lagarde, she's talking about 7.5%. If you look at ADB, after all this last fortnight, Christian Lagarde has said it's one of the most important countries in terms of growth. If you look at World Bank, they've now said, 10 days back, they've said India will grow at 7%. I don't know why you are so pessimistic.
Not pessimistic, vigilant.
Yeah.
Okay, we've run out of time. So just one last, very in a line literally, Amitabh. If there's one thing that you're concerned about Brand India, what is it? Would it be the lynchings? Is it economic? Is it civilizational? What would you worry about Brand India?
See, you can't have a Brand India if you do not have consistent levels of growth, and if you're not able to. It's not possible if you're not able to make a major improvement in 7 states of India. You know, the south of India, the west of India, parts of North India does well, but the eastern part of India, in each one of the indices, education, health, nutrition, maternal mortality, infant mortality, ability to do maths, ability to read mother tongue, all these 7 states have remained extremely backward. 7 states and 201 districts of India. If you don't transform in nutrition, education, and health, you can't grow for long periods of time. You need to transform them. And that's the key. And
would you add farmer distress to that?
You know, if you focus on 7 states of India, 201 districts of India, I'm taking issues of farmers' livelihood, agriculture productivity. All these are areas which will figure in that. You can't have growth in backward areas without a focus on agriculture, production, and productivity. You know, you need a second green revolution in India in terms of sheer technology.
So just as a summing up line, on a rate of 10, what would you rate the Modi government and this 3-year mark?
I would say it's taking into consideration all the structural reforms that have been carried out across sectors, I would rate it as 7.5%. And if they get on to better implementation, I think implementation is really the key now.
Okay. How many of you agree with 7.5? Would you raise your hand? Okay, but thank you very, very much for being here, Amitabh. I'd just like to share with the audience one thing that we didn't end up speaking about, which is water. You have been on record to say that you think going forward, elections will be won and lost on the issue of water. And I'd love to see what pinpointed slogan you come up for water to become really the big issue that it should. But thank you very, very much for your candid conversation, your passion, and your intent. Thank you, Amitabh. You want to say something?
To the gentleman who talked about losing jobs, I've lost many a jobs. I don't care about jobs. But I've fought with politicians. I've lost many a battle, and I have lost many a jobs. I care two hoots. But I'm passionate about India. And I'm a great optimist. And unlike you, I'm a great believer in the future of India.
Thank you very much, Amitabh.